aiming for outstanding perfection is a good thing. Expecting human perfection is not. Waiting for the time to be excellent actually sabotages our chances at making little steps forward. In order to encourage people to feel safe about taking risks, we need to actually treat failures differently.
Hey there, welcome to the Conductor's podcast. I'm your host, 𝙮𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙨, a conductor with over 20 years of experience working with professional symphony orchestras, opera houses, new music groups, and vocalists. I'm also founder of Girls Who Conduct and have mentored hundreds of conductors from across the globe. I created the Conductor's podcast to share all the behind-the-scenes secrets with you while I interview conductors, musicians, and business gurus from around the world. This is a space created for conductors, conducting students, musicians, and non-musicians who are curious and interested in learning more about the profession, craft, industry, and business. Shy away from the real talk? No way. Money, hardship, growth, and the roller coaster of a conducting career are all topics we discuss here. I will give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you take action on your big dream, move through the fear that's holding you back, and have a real impact. Now, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. Well, hey there. Welcome back to episode number 4 of the Conductor's Podcast. I'm your host, 𝙮𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙨, and I'm so glad you chose to join me here today. The job of a conductor often feels glorious and gratifying, but we are often dealing with anxiety and sometimes even fears. We just don't talk about it as often as we probably should. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you that I, too, have a lot of worries. When I conduct a new ensemble for the first time, I worry if we will click right from the beginning. I worry if they will approve my artistic choices, and I worry if the musicians would respond to my conducting as I had imagined in my room while studying the scores. Even with my own ensembles, I worry if I miss something in my score study process if that's a new piece for me. I worry if I have chosen the right repertoire for the group that is engaging and challenging. And I worry if I'm being the best version of myself while allowing them to be the best versions of themselves. Being a conductor is hard. It's a really difficult profession. We are always being judged by hundreds of eyes and ears, and a lot of times we are working with highly experienced, accomplished, and skilled musicians who have mastered their instruments or voice way longer than our conducting training. It's totally normal, and my friend, you are certainly not alone to have all the worries, anxiety, and fears. And this is why I'm so excited to introduce today's guest to you, conductor Tiffany Chang, as we will be discussing strategies to manage your fear and how to better cope with anxiety when self-doubt rises from time to time. Tiffany is the author of the blog Conductor as CEO and also Associate Professor of Conducting at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. She is also a fellow alumni of the Dallas Opera Hart Institute for Women Conductors, and I so look forward to speaking with her today on this topic as she has been advocating better leadership skills for conductors.
Welcome to the show, Tiffany. I'm so thrilled to welcome you to the show, and I can't wait for you to share your story and experience with my audience. So before we get started though, will you give everybody a brief intro, just a little bit about your background and how you get to where you are right now?
Sure. Thank you, 𝙮𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙨. It's a really great pleasure to be here talking with you and sharing my experiences. I am an orchestral and opera conductor currently based in Boston. I've been in Boston for the last 10 years. And my path to conducting has been kind of windy. And so, a little bit about how I got to where I am now. I'm a cellist, and I went to school for cello performance and music education. And I'd always thought that I wanted to teach. And teach in schools and teach orchestra. And in college, I got interested in a bunch of other things. So I got really interested in composition. I did a little bit of writing of music and orchestration. And I just kind of fell into conducting as the activity that could encompass all of my passions for music, the teaching, the performance, and the analysis, and all of that stuff. So that's how I became a conductor. I didn't set out to be a conductor at first when I started out in music school. And what also really interested me in conducting is the fact that I can make impact and that I could be a leader of people. So where I am right now is I have been in academia for the last 8 or so years. I currently teach at the Berklee College of Music in Boston and also the Oberlin Conservatory, just outside of Cleveland in Ohio. And I kind of fell into academia right out of graduate school, and now I am wondering what is next and what else is out there for me to explore and for me to do. A little bit about how I got here. I really think that it's really based on circumstances. I was in the right place at the right time. I knew the right people, and as I experienced life more, I've realized that those circumstances really govern both my successes that I've had as well as my failures, the things that didn't happen the way that I wanted to.
That's really interesting. I did not know that you were a cellist.
Yeah, well, I haven't played cello in a really long time, and I don't really go out and announce that I played a cello because I haven't played in a really long time. So
Do you at least still have your cello?
I do have my cello, and I do miss it when I think about, oh, what I really love is like playing chamber music, and I love playing with people and like being engaged in the act of playing music, which is different than a conductor because we work with sound, but we don't actually play anything, which is, I think, different.
Yeah, we don't physically produce any sound. That's like a huge difference
Yeah.
from the performers than,
Mhm.
say, conductor and composers. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your blog that you started, the Conductor as CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. So for many, 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 many years, I have been really interested in leadership ideas in the business industries. Particularly, I love listening to talks and listening and reading books written by CEOs about their experiences leading companies in the business and the tech industries. And I realized that all of these people, they are talking about improving work culture and increasing psychological safety in the workplace and creating an environment where there's a great sense of purpose and fulfillment in the people that work there. And in reading about and listening to all these people talk about these things, I realized that we're not really doing so much of that in our own music industry. And I started to wonder why that was. And I came across a study from the mid 1990s about a survey of job satisfaction rates from many industries, and orchestral musicians was ranked fairly low in the ranking, and they were actually ranked below the job satisfaction rate of prison guards and flight
Wow.
attendants, and that was just really mind blowing for me. But I was thinking about my experiences as a conductor and as a cellist, and I thought, well, I could see why that is. I could see why maybe that people are not as happy as they can be in the orchestral context. And granted that this study is, almost 30 years ago, from almost 30 years ago in the mid 1990s, but I really do feel like that we haven't really made a lot of strides because we just haven't focused on that aspect. We focused on other things like expanding our repertoire and diversity in our people in who are playing in the orchestras and working in our organizations. And we've also worked on solidifying our financial structures and our organizational structures and building our audiences. And I feel like that in that process, we've kind of neglected the people and the fulfillment of the people doing the work. So in most studies that have talked about job satisfaction rates or low job satisfaction rates, they've always talked about three things that cause low job satisfaction rates, and that's true, I think, in orchestras as well. Number one is that there's no control over the work environment. You don't usually get to choose when you have rehearsals, how long the rehearsals are, where your concerts are, and when they are, and things like that. Number two, there's no autonomy over how we do work. For an orchestral musician, you are not just being told by what's on the page how to play the music, but you're also being told by another person, like the conductor, how you should play something. So there's not a lot of autonomy. And number three, there's no ability to speak up. And I find that really prevalent, I think, in the orchestral culture. As orchestral musicians, sometimes we don't feel like we can say we disagree with a conductor, and that's really scary and kind of frowned upon. And if we have ideas about how something can be better, we usually don't speak up because we're afraid. So I was really not surprised about the statistic itself, but I was most shocked about how there were no recommendations really about what to do. So I wanted to apply these ideas that I've been listening to and reading about from various business leaders to my own artistic work as a conductor and a leader. And so for a long time, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And during all the time, I thought that I really couldn't do anything about this problem unless I get a job, until I got a job as a conductor in the industry. And I felt like I couldn't do anything about it, couldn't implement my ideas for change until I was conducting a professional organization. And that job just never came. And I've been waiting for that job to come. So I've been feeling stuck. And I felt like that my hands were tied and I just became more and more anxious. And during the pandemic, I had a lot of time to think. And I decided finally in February of 2021, just about 6 months ago, to start writing about it. I called it Conductor as CEO, mainly just because I was reading a lot about what CEOs did. And I was like, well, conductors can do what some of the CEOs are doing. So I thought conductors as CEO makes sense. Once I started writing, I realized that it is true that if I don't share my ideas, nobody knows that I have them. And that was one of the things that I didn't realize when I was so
That's so
scared.
true.
And I was also scared about the fact that, oh, I have to be in a position of authority, or I have to be in a position within a professional organization as a conductor in order to implement the ideas. And I just realized writing about it is another way of implementation. And I didn't have to be on the podium in order to share the ideas and try to make impact and try to make change. What was really, really surprising was that once I started writing the first plot, I felt immediate relief from the anxiety and the stuckness that I felt. I immediately felt like I had motion. And then I thought some more about how being scared of writing about these ideas was actually similar to a lot of other things that I was scared of in my life. I was also scared for applying to connecting jobs and doing things that helped me overcome a lack of confidence that I had. I was hiding from those things as opposed to, and then it just made me crystallize the fact that I am actually passionate about helping professional musicians feel more satisfied and fulfilled at work. And I've discovered that that is one of a really big mission of mine as a conductor, but also as a person and as a professional in the industry. So my hopes for the future for this blog, I'm just going to keep writing blog posts. I'm now over 30 blog posts. I write every week. I post on Thursdays because that's when the first one came out, on a Thursday. And I just thought, well, I got to keep routine. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just write one every Thursday.
Yeah,
Yes.
consistency is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So the consistency is, again, out of circumstance. My first post is on Thursday, so I kept posting on Thursdays. So my current plan is just to keep going, and it's become a way for me to not only share my ideas and inspire change, but also for me to continue building my confidence through feeling like there's motion in the work that I do, and as a way to confront my own fear.
I think that's kind of like the recurring theme of this podcast from the people that I've talked to and interviewed is like you really need 30 seconds of courage to just go ahead and do it. And then once you start doing it, you will have it figured out. And as Tiffany was just saying, I wanted to just put it out there for all my audience and also for myself as a reminder, we don't need to be an expert in somewhere. We don't need to be authority, or we don't need to have 1,000 followers to verify that our opinion's worth. But we really need to find a way to get our ideas out, because if you don't, people don't know that you have these ideas. I'm really glad that you brought up the fearful part, because we all have some fears in our professional life, in personal life, or about our career, feeling stuck. And I know you are here to share some tips about how to manage this fear and how to maybe move on or move along with those feelings. So could you start with some of the things that you wish you had known or things that had worked for you?
Yeah, I cannot agree more with what you just said about how by speaking up, we allow others to speak up, or others to feel the feelings that we feel. And one of the things that I wish that I had known is that other people were feeling the stuckness that I felt, or the fear that I felt. And once I started to share my ideas, I was surprised at just how many people had the same feelings. And it made me wonder why we hide those feelings from the world, and even from ourselves, or we just don't we try to not think about it because we think that we either can't deal with it or we shouldn't deal with it. And so one of the things that I really wish that I had tackled earlier in my career, in my life, is trying to figure out how to manage perfectionism and my fear of failure. For I believed that excellence, once we achieve it, perfectionism, once we achieve it, it will lead to all the good things. It will lead to the good job, it will lead to the good salary, it will lead to the recognition that we want, or all of those things. And sometimes waiting for the time to be excellent or be perfect actually sabotages our chances at making little steps forward in our career early on. And I feel like I was standing still a lot because I was waiting and waiting and waiting for the moment in which I was perfect. And of course, that just never came, because I am never perfect. So I'll share 4 different ideas and thoughts that I've been thinking about that have helped me rethink failure and perfectionism, and to encourage me to be more courageous. So the first one is simply rethinking what perfectionism is. And I think that when we are training to become professional musicians, we always thought that there's some honor in perfection. That's what we strive for, and once we achieve it, we are amazing. And so we keep striving for it and we don't reach it. And when we're not perfect, we hide our work because it's not perfect. It's not ready for people to see it. And I heard in a podcast with Seth Godin, who is a marketing guru, entrepreneur, thought leader, and he said that perfectionism is actually a way of hiding. He said that we feel like we can't share our work because it's not perfect. And so as a result, we're actually hiding from the potential of being rejected. We're hiding from the fear maybe people don't resonate with it. And this leads to our not taking action. And I thought that as a conductor, we expect perfection from the people that we work with. That's something that, we often pride ourselves on, and it's very black and white. It's you're either perfect or you're not perfect. And I've had so many friends who are instrumentalists who just are devastated by the audition process for orchestras because they feel like they have to be perfect, and that is the only way to win an audition. And that makes them not perform as well, or makes them not share something that they think is not perfect, but it may be just good enough. I think aiming for outstanding performance is a great thing, but expecting human perfection is not, from ourselves or the people that we work with. And that's actually a quote from a book that I've been reading recently by Hubert Joly, who is the former CEO of Best Buy. It's a book called The Heart of Business, and I cannot recommend it enough. So this quote again is, aiming for outstanding perfection is a good thing. Expecting human perfection is not. As a conductor, we have been taught to be right all the time and be perfect all the time. And I'm not a good conductor if I'm not perfect. And that has really damaged my self-confidence and made me not want to try for things, made me scared of things.
Do you feel that this pursuit of perfection comes more from ourselves or from the imaginary others watching us? Yesterday, I was watching an audition video, and because of COVID, a lot of times auditions are now like done by submitting a video of your playing. And I've heard
Hmm.
musicians, they really wanted to put the best out, so they re-record so many times
Hmm.
until they get so burned down and so burned out, and they can find like the best one.
Hmm.
So I was watching it was a youth orchestra audition, and the girl said something at the end of the video. She said, "I'm still not happy with what I just played, but I promised my teacher I would only do it 2 times, and this is the second time, so I'm going to stop there." And
Hmm.
I felt so good. I just want to praise the teacher because like you really shouldn't beat you up for something that is not
Hmm.
possible, like being perfect or had flawless, which we are
Hmm.
trained to do as musicians. A lot of times, like after the performance, we were thinking, okay, this went wrong. That was not great. We forgot to feel how joyful that was to make music.
I do think that the fear comes from within. I think that we often misunderstand and we often miscalculate what other people think of us. We think we know what they think of us, but it's actually a maybe sometimes a projection of our own insecurities of how we feel about ourselves. And you are never going to know what somebody thinks of you or your ideas until you ask them. And we often stop before the asking part. And then we don't grow because we don't ask and find out what they really think. And if they really think that we have room to grow, then I would actually like to know that I have room to grow. And maybe I have room to grow in XYZ ways, but I've been working on growing in ABC ways. And I've been going the wrong way. But having that feedback others, it's so important, but we are afraid to ask it often.
So moving on to like rethink perfection and also accept imperfection as part of the norm, what would be your next tip that you're sharing with us?
Yeah, well, I think we often connect the quality of our decision with the quality of the outcome. Because why are we striving for perfection? Because we think that being perfect or our decision to be perfect will lead us to the great outcome. Sometimes we think that a good outcome are getting a job, are doing a great performance, are because we made a good decision. So if we end up somehow playing a really good performance, we think that it's a good decision that we tried to be perfect. And on the contrary, when something bad happens, like we have a really severe mess up or we have a memory slip, we think that, oh, all the decisions that we made and all the work that we did was bad. We made a bad decision because it was a bad outcome. We shouldn't do it again. This idea of confusing failure with wrong choices or bad choices is something I've been coming to think a lot about. What I've learned is that our expectation of the outcome biases our how we make the decision or what we decide to do. I think instead of focusing on the projected outcome and whether a decision is right or wrong in going for that outcome, it's so much more important to think about how to evaluate and improve our thinking about why we are making the decision in the first place, even if we failed, to evaluate the quality of that decision, to do it based on what we got out of it rather than the outcome itself. And it's something that I'm currently working on, but I think it's worth sharing.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's actually a two-way street because we associate bad outcomes with something that we did or
Hmm.
we shouldn't have applied, or I was not good enough, I was not worthy, I was not a good fit, or some other things. And also, we do it the other way around because we anticipated getting a bad outcome, so we don't do the actions. While you were
Hmm.
saying we should really focus on the journey because the majority of things are out of our control. But if we
Hmm.
focus on things that we have control over, what we have learned through the experience, through this journey, it would be a much more desired way of tackling our fears.
Yes, so super, super important. And it's not often how we're taught. I think, we're taught on, I mean, and outside of music too, we're taught on focusing on the grades. Did you get an A on this test? Did you get the certificate? Did you get the degree? And we're aiming for those outcomes. And I do think that that's sometimes why people become dissatisfied. And so I do think that it's actually a lot of it is not our fault because it's the way that we were brought up through the education system and then through the way society works. Yeah.
So far you've talked about first just rethink about perfection and
Mhm.
accept the imperfection as part of the norm. And the
Mhm.
second one was to not associate bad outcome with our initiatives or our efforts, and do not
Yeah.
anticipate a bad outcome so you don't do anything. So what would be the next one? I'm so excited.
Yeah, so I think this is again something that we don't think a lot about. I was listening to this presentation by a psychologist called Amy Edmondson. She was talking about failure. There are actually two kinds of failures. There are praiseworthy failures and there are blameworthy failures. And we don't often differentiate how we treat those two. So the praiseworthy failures are failures that happened because you were experimenting or because of complexity in the task itself, versus a blameworthy failure, which is simply because of inattention or incompetence. So I'll give you an example. So a praiseworthy failure could be, a flute player making a mistake, playing a wrong note because they were trying to try out a new breathing strategy, versus something that would be a blameworthy failure, which is just simply that they were not prepared, they did not practice. We see those two kind of as the same thing. We just see the mistake, we just see the missed note, we just see the cracked note, we just see, the not togetherness in an ensemble, and we respond to those two in exactly the same way. In order to encourage people to feel safe about taking risks, we need to actually treat those failures differently. And that brings me to the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about the low levels of job satisfaction rates. I think this contributes to that, in that people kind of musicians in ensembles, they feel kind of complacent just sitting there and allowing other people to tell them what to do. So we end up just kind of being okay with where we are because it works, it's safe. We don't have to have conflicts with anyone, and we don't have to fail.
But
So
sometimes I felt
yeah.
it's an industry thing because, as you were saying, I remember I was once in a conducting workshop where the first movement of Beethoven's Symphony Number 3 was on the repertoire, and the majority of other conductors started in the middle of the movement and then take the repeat to avoid the beginning like unsettlement,
Yeah.
because a lot of people, like after the pum pum ba-da-dee, it's very easy that you lose tempo or something happens. And I thought, okay, this is a workshop. I'm here to learn. It should be the perfect place for me to experiment with things. So I insisted on starting from the beginning, and I said, I'm going to try a few different things so I get a feel of how I can push this a little better. But then I was immediately eliminated from the workshop at the end of the day. So that workshop was structured as a mini competition, even though they say they were not. So they have 3 different rehearsals, and you have to advance into the next rehearsal. And I was viewed as impotent by the teachers or the reviewer that I couldn't conduct it, even though I was just wanting to improve myself. But I felt that was happening a lot of the
Right.
times
Yeah.
because the industry, we wanted you to show up being perfect. While I hope that our conversation and then also your blog and writing could spreading seeds into people rethinking the environment we are creating. Why are we only praising the same type of actions because it's safe? We should actually be promoting creativity and risk taking. And
Yeah, and in that case, you were actually not praised for taking a risk. I resonate with that. I'm sure that a lot of your listeners resonate with it. We're just afraid to share that we feel that way. Thank you for sharing that story because I think it's so powerful for other people to hear.
so we talked about rethinking perfection and do not associate bad outcomes with your actions. And the third one, to differentiate praiseworthy failures. So, what would be your next tip?
Yeah. So the last thing that I want to share, the fourth thing, is this idea that fear actually makes us feel good, and it's actually a biological thing. So when we are scared, when we feel fear, our natural biological response is we fight, we flight, or we freeze. So you fight the fear, you fight the thing that puts you in danger, or you flee, you run away from it, or you freeze. And actually, freeze is not you're not doing anything, but actually, freeze is it's the oscillation between your deciding whether you want to fight or flight. So that's why you freeze. It's a very quick oscillation. But there's this idea that when you decide to step into the fear and fight the fear, you actually get a hit of dopamine, which is your biological chemical that makes you feel good, gives you pleasure. And so when you decide to fight the fear, you get a hit of dopamine, and that is your body's natural response to confront that fear. And it gives you more of that feel good chemical to make you keep going in that direction. And what it also does is it triggers something called the courage circuit, and it takes you from a place of being scared to a place of being courageous. And when you are courageous, you get that, again, that hit of dopamine. What's interesting is that when you don't have fear, when you don't feel fear, you don't get that hit of dopamine. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And if we think about when we are in a performance, when we feel like we're in flow, what happens? Well, we are doing something scary. We take a step forward into that fear. We play the first phrase, and then, oh, it goes well. Okay. So we actually feel good. We feel that dopamine of confronting that fear. And then it gives us that energy to move forward and play the next phrase. And then maybe that goes well too. And then we get another hit of dopamine. That's why I think we get into the state of flow in a performance, because we are latching on, we're using that natural biological creation of dopamine to keep working towards our fears, to keep pushing towards our fears. And as a result, we end up being able to accomplish something and confront and overcome our fear. You don't have to achieve the big milestone in order to receive that dopamine. Simply taking one step forward toward the fear makes you feel good. And when you recognize that feeling in yourself, you should take the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And it will encourage and help you to do the thing that is scary. When you do more of the scary and hard things, the quantity will actually lead to more quality. So here's an example. If I choose to perform 100 times in public, I will have a higher chance of 10 of those performances being successful. So that's 10 out of 100, that is 10%. Odds are likely that I probably get that 10%. Now, if I only choose to perform 10 times, it is really hard to have all 10 of those 100% be successful. So it's a statistics thing. And so I really believe in that, just doing more of the thing that you find scary, whether it's performance or whether it's sharing your ideas or whether it's having conversations or whether it's trying something that maybe is risky, doing more of it will increase your success rate. And I think it goes for, myself sharing my ideas in my blog. If I write a blog every week, odds are if I've written about 30 blogs so far, I'd probably say like 5 of them probably are good, and it's okay if the other 25 are not as good. But I've got 5 out of those 30 that are worth something. And if I keep doing more, I will get more of those good ones come out. In order for the good work to come out of me, I need to allow the bad work to come out of me as well. And the quantity allows the bad work to come out.
Yeah, I think like what you said is really interesting because I was listening to a podcast hosted by Tracy Otsuka. She
Mhm.
has this podcast called ADHD for Smart Ass Women. And
Mhm.
she's a lawyer. She learned much later in her life that she actually has ADHD, and that's the condition that helped her being so active and have the energy to do all the initiatives. And she talked about how to achieve things by breaking them into very small but successful steps.
Mhm.
So a little bit like what you say, just to kind of really focus on really small thing. Okay, this phrase was great. Now I feel good about it. Now we can move on to the next phrase and focus on the positive things so that you can continue working towards like an end goal or like continue to enjoy the journey.
Yeah,
So I think those
absolutely.
are
Yeah.
just like great tips of kind of tackling your or kind of making peace with your fear in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely making peace because the fear will never go away. I think I've made peace with the fact that I will never not be scared. And that's okay. And as I've shared more of my work, I realized that everybody else is scared of sharing their work, and we're all in the same boat. And maybe if I decide to do it first, sharing my work even when it's not ready, other people will be encouraged, will be inspired to do the same thing. And that's, I think, really how change starts to happen.
So, Tiffany, I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast today. And we'll link everything in the show note, but I wanted the audience to hear it from you. So, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My The easiest way to find me is to go to my website, tiffanychang.net, and it's got links to my Facebook, my Instagram, and my LinkedIn, my YouTube channel, and you can find everything on tiffanychang.net. And I can't thank you enough, Chaowen, for having me here and allowing me to have this conversation and for me to share my work. So I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
There you have it. I hope you loved this chat with Tiffany as much as I loved it. I thought it was so inspirational because I loved all the tips and strategies. Pick one to start your action today. Perhaps accept the imperfect version of ourselves and treat yourself as you would treat your best friend? And if you were listening from the car or at the gym, you can always find all information in a show note at chaowenting.com/4. That is chaowenting.com/4. One final request. If you're listening to this podcast and are loving it, can I ask you to please share this podcast with just one friend? A fellow conductor, a musician, or even a family member that would be interested in knowing more about this profession? You can send them a text, a DM, tag me on social media to tell them that this is something that you've been enjoying listening, and I would greatly appreciate it. There you have it. I'm looking forward to diving into next week's episode with you, which is all about tips for writing a killer cover letter. Want to hear all the secret of how I got from all rejections to being a finalist for 3 positions and winning 2 in 3 months? Make sure you subscribe to my podcast so you won't miss any new episode. Okay, folks, I can't wait to see you again next week at the same time, same place. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.